Joining us here is Dr. Heather Fretwell, here to talk about a really interesting topic that I'm so excited to have her here. Always a favorite. Dr. Fretwell, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angelis, for inviting me back.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. So this is a really interesting term that we're talking about. It's called post-traumatic growth. And I'm just hearing this around, I had not heard this before. I thought there was only post-traumatic stress disorder. So tell me what post-traumatic growth is. What does it involve?
So post-traumatic growth is a term that started to be used in the 1990s, and it was investigated by a pair of psychologists that wrote some of the seminal articles about it. But what it really represents is that, thank goodness, sometimes trauma can inspire us to positive paradigm shifts, as well as reinforce negative paradigm shifts.
And Dr. Fretwell, so we have had this traumatic experience of this pandemic. And I understand that also it sort of during this time, I was speaking with a doctor, and he was saying that during a pandemic or after a traumatic event, you can either die, survive, or thrive. So this post-traumatic growth is people want to thrive after this pandemic. So give me a couple of sort of examples. I mean, are people sort of saying, I'm committed to bringing more joy. I'm committed to learning more. I'm committed to now exploring. Maybe I've taken advantage of things that I shouldn't regret doing in the past.
Exactly. Sometimes traumas, and especially these really big collective traumas, like if you look at maybe similar experiences, might be some of the more devastating hurricanes and how they affect communities. And then afterwards, you can see this tremendous community coming together in the wake of the devastation. I think that's probably our best metaphor for what we've endured. I mean, if you kind of think of the pandemic as a storm where we have all had to really isolate in our storm cellars for like over a year, when we're ready to come out, during that time, we've had so much time for reflection. So many of us have endured all kinds of loss, whether that's of lifestyle or loved ones, or assumptions that we thought were basic premises of how we go about life in America. And that really can lead to a really deep rethinking of what's important in life. It can lead to this really big exploration of existential questions of, well, what's the most important parts about being a human in this life, in our communities, within our families? And what do I want to do about that? It can just really put a strobe light on not only our weaknesses, but our strengths as individuals, as communities, as organizations. And I think we're going to see some things that are very impressive.
And you talk about, I like how you put that as strobe light. That's really interesting. And maybe people will dance more. I don't know. Let's hope so. So we have communities, we have families, we have friends, we have our work. So these are all sort of communities that are sort of maybe excited to contribute to more, excited to be with the people that we are with. So just interesting, our collective communities that we have in our life, the way that you say that, from what I'm understanding.
Yes, I can give a personal example. Yesterday morning, for the first time in a year, I was in an in-person meeting with two other people at work, and we were just joyous. Oh my goodness, I can see you. I can see all your body language. It's not just a Zoom or WebEx or other kinds of less personal interaction. And that's a marked, even though perhaps minor, example of, I think, what we celebrate as we come together. I hear from folks that are coming together more as vaccinations are more common, and people are cautiously coming together more. Side note to always continue to abide by CDC guidelines. And for example, had an Easter holiday, especially with the glorious weather that was outdoors, seeing family members they may have not seen for a year and a half, especially for family members who have more fragile health. And just really appreciating that in a way and a perspective that would not have been the same pre-pandemic. And these are kind of like the silver linings for terrible situations that, as a nation we can, and as communities that we go through. there should never be a, well, thank goodness this terrible thing happened because then we have this beautiful result afterwards. We have to be very careful never to say or allude to anything like that. But we can say, thank goodness that despite this terrible thing happen, that we can have some lessons and some paradigm shifts and some differences in how we perceive and our perspectives on life that can bring us closer together, that can really underscore to us, well, really what's important, that can really help us really value connection and community in a way that we may have taken for granted before.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting that you say that, yes, this has been tragic in many ways for many people on different levels. And I'm just wondering, those who've lost loved ones, I'm hoping that they can look at this in the same way, but it might take some time. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think
I mean,
that's
I'm sorry, when the world is elated, it's kind of like, well, I'm sad. I'm still sad.
exactly. And in terms of post-traumatic growth, it also does not affect everyone the same way, and it does not affect everyone in the same timeline. You alluded earlier to some kind of keywords in trauma work, and one is going from survivor to thriver. And that can take longer for people who have lost more, for people who have struggled more, um, and for people who are having a more difficult time knowing where to start to go back to reconnection. There's a great piece on social media lately that I've saw that, how do I learn to people again? And people kind of grappling with this, after I've been in this habit now of kind of social isolation, how do I learn to break the habits that protected me during the pandemic? But then as the pandemic eases, now they're no longer going to serve me. And just being very consciously insightful and introspective about that, I think can be helpful.
Well, that's so funny because I was talking to someone the other day and, I'm just hearing around some people, and people need to feel safe for as long as they want to feel safe. If they want to continue wearing masks, I mean, I know I continue to wear my masks, not out of fear. I mean, because I'm of infection. I mean, I'm going to get my shot, in a week from now. So I'm very excited about that. So, yeah. And, but to sort of come out of that in a way in which having post-pandemic anxiety, let's say, I don't want to not wear my mask, when I go outside. Maybe for many reasons, maybe fear of reinfection, maybe just not wanting to infect other people, want to really trust that social distancing is still important, even as we get and understand and come into a place in which herd immunity. But that's interesting that you brought that topic up because I was just speaking to that. And like you said, everything is on a person's own time. If you're wearing a mask for the, until whatever, fall and beyond, it's not going to hurt anybody, right? Anyway, I was also talking to a doctor, and he was an infectious disease expert yesterday, and we were talking about he was saying, we touched on this topic, but I didn't use the same phrase. I don't know. I just asked curious about what he was looking forward to. And I know that you just spoke about being in the room with your two colleagues, and it was like, oh my God, that's huge though. That's a huge start. I mean, let's not minimize that. And he was saying, I am vaccinated. I have my 2 doses. 2 weeks from now, my grandkids are coming over. And I'm like, and it's like, and I'm like, yeah, it's like Christmas, you've been waiting for so long because he has not seen his grandkids since this began. So
Oh,
just, kids on the other side of the screen. So that was, so can I ask you, I don't know if you've thought about this yet, but what is the first thing that you're going to do when you feel comfortable to go out and revisit the world in a way circa maybe 2019?
okay, this is going to sound terribly cliche, but my husband and I we're not the most exciting people. But one of the things we've missed so terribly is a date that involves dinner and a movie. We have not done that in over a year. It's one of our favorite things. And so we're just now thinking about when can we do that. So my husband gets his second dose a week from Tuesday. So we're thinking maybe by early May, we can have date night. And, it's those prosaic things that you take for granted. And I cannot tell you how excited I am over Olive Garden and a movie.
Can I mean, That will no. Okay, so I know what you're gonna do because we're girls. You're gonna pick out your dress. You're gonna pick out your makeup. You're gonna do your hair. And I think it's something that we might have taken advantage of, like a date night. Oh, we can't do it this week. Let's do it next week. But no, 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 not anymore. Let's go.
That's exactly
That's
right.
so excited. It's not
It's a
simple. That's
newfound,
wonderful. That's
yep,
wonderful. I mean, I'm not going to Bermuda. When I feel safe to go paddleboarding, I'm going with my best buddy here from the station. We're going paddleboarding.
wonderful.
Yeah, spend an afternoon on the water. Anything else that you'd like to add about this post-traumatic growth? I think it's a very interesting term.
It really is. And I would just want to say it's related, I think, to the human, not just the human vulnerability to traumas, because we have these fragilities and they're real. And we have losses to mourn, and that's real too. And in American culture, we tend to shortchange the impact of loss on people. And so everybody needs to know that if you need time to grieve, take some years to grieve. The standard of grief has shortened very weirdly in our culture over the last few decades.
Mhm.
But that we also, as humans, have the capacity to renew ourselves. We have the capacity to find new purpose. We have the capacity to now deeply appreciate things in our life, people in our life, to deeply appreciate the opportunity for novel experiences. And maybe this will decrease some of our procrastination. Maybe this will inspire us to um, think differently about how we approach work-life balance. Maybe this will help us think a little differently about how we approach communication and how close-knit we want to have our um, family, friends, and sometimes with our friends network, I even call that intentional family, folks that we're deliberately very close to. And really just bringing us all together in celebratory ways. And as you mentioned, Dr. Gillis, I really hope that we do have a lot more dancing and singing.
Well, I think so. Speaking of that, I mean, the Spanish flu of 1918 followed by the Roaring Twenties. Let's see what happens, right?
Here's to a very positive Roaring Twenties.
Mhm. Well, last question. Do you know what movie you guys are going to go see?
Well, we saw the preview for Cruella last night, and we've been kind of intrigued by how Disney has redone is looking at villains. So, for example, Maleficent is actually one of my favorite movies now. And it just looks really visually stunning and fun and intriguing, and taking a new look at a one-dimensional character. And so that might be our first movie.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful time, and I'm excited for you. And
Thank you so much.
as always, great to see you. Thank you so much. We always appreciate you when you come on.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.